Hi, everyone, and welcome. I want to begin by telling a story. This story takes place about 4 years ago. It was the weekend after the 2016 election, and there was a way that we were still feeling stunned and definitely unsettled by the election results. And so a number of us from 6th and I decided to go to worship with our friends at Metropolitan AME Church, just a mile or so away from 6th and I. And so we were there. It was the Sunday after the election, and we all knew who was going to be president-elect. And the congregation was singing, as congregations so often do or did before COVID, and will again one day in the future. The congregation was singing, and I wish for the purposes of this story I remember which hymn or which psalm they were singing. But you just have to imagine the prayers that were emerging from people's mouths. And all of a sudden, Pastor Bill Lamar stood up on the bema, on the pulpit at Metropolitan AME, and he went like this in the middle of the prayer. And then a number of his congregants stood up from the pews in which they were sitting, and in response, while they were singing the psalm, they went like this. And to me, it was a perfect encapsulation of the intersection of religion and politics, and really reflected what is my deep belief and truth, which is that religion and politics, when done well, are in a symbiotic relationship in which one supports the other and in which both are premised on the same ideas. So let me take you back to the Psalms a little bit. Again, I don't know which one was being sung at Metropolitan, but perhaps it was Psalm 10, in which we say in Hebrew, Ta'avat anavim shamata Adonai. Oh God, you listen to the requests of the poor. You pay attention with your ear. You champion the orphan and the downtrodden. You make earthly humans tyrannize no more. Maybe that was the political or the religious statement they were making, or maybe it was from Psalm 48, in which we say, for the leader, a love song. You love righteousness. You hate wickedness. Rightly, God will anoint you with oil. God will make of you the Messiah. Or maybe it was in Proverbs 31 that we were singing at Metropolitan that Sunday so many years ago. Speak up for those who can't speak, for the rights of all the unfortunate. Speak up, judge righteously, champion the poor and the needy. The intersection between religion and politics right there in one verse. And this is, of course, something that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who we remember this weekend, this is something that both of these prophetic men understood in their core. They understood that the goal of politics is to believe and to act upon the belief that you can interrupt a system to change who has power, and to give power to the powerlessness when politics is done well. And the goal of religion, again, when it is done well, is also to believe that change is always possible, that when we act with justice, with compassion, when we act with mercy, when we act with loving kindness, we can heal a broken world. And that every world is broken to begin with, and it is our job to work for healing. Do you see how they intersect? Politics and religion. Now, of course, we've all had the experience of politics being done poorly, selfishly, hypocritically, and religion, of course, the same. And sometimes we even see the intersection, such as when we see a politician stand in front of a church with a Bible and pretend that they are using, I don't even know, religious values, political values. There certainly is a kind of change that happens even in those moments, even if it's a change for the worse, even if the arc is bending away from and not towards justice. But even in those moments, we see how religion and politics intersects, and sometimes some of us who are a little bit more liberal, a little bit more progressive, spend a little bit more of our time hanging out with agnostics and atheists. We don't like to think of religion and politics intersecting, especially because so much of that is spoken about with pride on the right. But what would it mean to speak about it with pride on the left? What would it mean to elect, for instance, a pastor to the Senate and to see what his belief in compassion and justice, how it can help interrupt the American system and bring change? What would it mean if we use the best of godliness, the best of religion, and applied it to create the best of the political system? I'm optimistic. I know that we are in a pessimistic moment. And I know that January 6th might have made some of us feel more broken than ever. But I am approaching this weekend in which we remember Dr. King, and this program in which we honor Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, I'm approaching it with hope. Because at the end of the day, hope is also a cornerstone of religion and of politics. The hope of a more perfect union, the hope of a healed world. Are they that different? I don't believe that they are. So welcome, everyone. Welcome here to 6th and I, even from the comfort of your own homes. Welcome to what we're calling this year the MLK Experience. I'm Rabbi Shira from 6th and I, and very, very soon you will have the honor and privilege of meeting, God willing, not for the first time, but definitely not for the last, my friend, my teacher, Pastor Kearney from Turner Memorial AME Church, which worshiped here in this building for over 50 years, and with whom we have been in community all these years, not only as we've celebrated this weekend together, but also as we've marched together, as we've fought together, as we've learned together, and as we've grown together. We've decided to do the MLK program a little bit different this year. We could not approximate the feeling of having 900 of you in this space. So instead, Pastor Kearney and I, along with Kira Dorr, and along with Jarrell Pridgeon, and along with Camillo and Liana, our sound technicians, we took a little bit of a field trip to Philadelphia. And there we visited what are some sacred spaces for the Jewish community and for the Black AME community. We visited the National Museum of American Jewish History, and we visited Mother Bethel AME Church, the first AME church in America. You'll hear more of the story about Mother Bethel from Pastor Kearney in just a little bit. So we encourage you to go along on this journey with us whenever you watch this video. You can watch it all at once, you can watch it in parts. I want to say before I turn it over to the tape that we recorded this video more than a month ago. We recorded it before the election in Georgia. We recorded it before the desecration of our Capitol in a coup attempt on January 6th. But the truth is that those of us who believe in the work of justice, everything that we spoke about a month ago is just as important today, if not more so. While I was stunned to watch the Capitol be desecrated on January 6th, I was not surprised, nor should anyone be who was paying attention. There is a lot of work to be done, and God willing, we will harness the spark of godliness that is in all of us, every single one of us, and we will grow that spark, and we will bring it to the courthouse, and we will bring it to the Capitol, and we will bring it to the voting booth, and we will bring it to the streets, and we will bring it to the stores in which we shop, and the people that we meet, and the workers that we hire. It will be the spark of religion. It will be the spark of politics. It will be the spark of justice. Ken Yehi Ratzon, so may it be. And now I turn it over to Philadelphia, to the museum, and to Pastor Kearney. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're here at the National Museum of American Jewish History on Independence Mall to spend a few hours here, learn a little bit about this Jewish story, but also talk about both of our stories as well. Come on, let's go. We're standing here in the museum, in the area of the museum that focuses on Jewish participation in justice movements, including the feminist movement, but this case right here speaks to participation in the civil rights movement.
Wow.
And so I just want to take you through it a little bit, because I'm going to pretend that this is like to teach you a little Jewish history, but the truth is most of the Jews watching this tonight, they also don't know this part of their history. You can see how this is in 1969. It's a cover of Time magazine. It's called Black versus Jew, A Tragic Confrontation. It's, of course, a tragic magazine cover for a number of reasons. First of all, as we talked about last year, a few years ago, one of the ways that anti-Semitism functions is by dividing oppressed groups from each other so that they can't fight for liberation together. It's also problematic because Black versus Jew, as if there aren't also Jews who are Black,
right,
of all colors. So that's the first thing that I'm so glad they have here. The second part of the exhibit that I think is interesting is one of the first meetings of the Jewish Defense League, which is a Jewish organization that started in 1968, and it was started building on some of the ideals of the Black Panther movement.
Wow.
This idea that we have to sort of protect ourselves.
Wow.
It's not an unproblematic organization, but whatever, we'll save that for another time.
Right.
Down here, and this is I'm a little embarrassed to show this to you, but I think it's important for everyone watching. This is a handwritten letter by a Jewish restaurant owner in Atlanta, Georgia from 1964. And he's writing about why he is not going to integrate his restaurant, why he will not let people of different races. And I know so many Jews take such pride in our work for justice. We should, but there are a lot of Jews who are not participating in the fight for justice, and actually, that's a nicer way of saying it, who also themselves are subverting the work of justice. There's a great line in here that I just saw as we were preparing.
Right.
Let me see if I can find it. I showed it to you. But I have faith in the principles which have made America great.
Where have we heard that?
I have no idea, Pastor Kearney. But it turns out that, in his opinion, what makes America great is segregation.
Wow.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Everything old is new again, as they say in the book of Ecclesiastes, right?
Right.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new under the sun.
So there's just a few more things, and then we'll go into our conversation. This, of course, is a poster of three men who ultimately were killed fighting against voter suppression in the South. Andrew Goodman, James Earl Chaney, and Michael Schwerner. And again, the same idea that we are still today fighting against voter suppression.
Absolutely.
And last but not least, this is the iconic photo of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Dr. Martin Luther King, and others, plus a letter from Rabbi Heschel to Dr. King inviting him to Passover Seder in 1965. The story goes that Dr. King did not make it to Passover Seder in 1965, but the story goes that he was going to attend Passover Seder in 1968,
Right.
but unfortunately Passover was 8 days after Dr. King was assassinated.
Wow.
But in this letter, Rabbi Heschel is just talking about how moving it was to be able to stand next to Dr. King as Dr. King led this fight for justice. So one of the things that we agreed as we were preparing for today is to each bring a very short quote, you from Dr. King, me from Rabbi Heschel, about justice, and sort of like to have a conversation about it today, because obviously this Shabbat service is in memory of these two holy souls and a recommitment to our work.
Absolutely.
And what's so amazing is in the car this morning, we realized how close that. So okay, you read yours, and I'll read mine, and then we'll discuss.
So the quote that I have, Dr. King delivered at Riverside Church in New York, and it says, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I think that particular quote really speaks volumes and also deals with and sheds light on the relationship that the rabbi and Dr. King had. Because more than ever before in America, even now in 2020, silence is a great enemy to the injustice that's happening that we see. And that's one of the things that I love and appreciate about our two communities, of really coming together and rallying around the issues that plague our society and giving voice to those issues, and not allowing the color privilege that some often benefit from to keep them silent on the issues that many persons of color, brown and black skin, are experiencing in America. So I think this quote is really speaks volumes.
I could not agree with you more. So here's the quote that I picked, right?
Okay.
Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself.
Wow.
It is a silent justification affording evil acceptability in society.
Yeah.
Right? That when we are silent, what we are doing is we are allowing evil to flourish. Because it's not like evil's not there. It is always there.
Absolutely.
But when you don't counteract it, when you don't say something about it, it just continues to flourish. And I think about that. Nowadays, it's very au courant. It's very hip to sort of say that you are against racism, to say that you're fighting for justice.
Right.
But sometimes the moments when you actually have to step into the fray, they're incredibly scary.
Yes.
But you stand back and you don't do it.
Right.
And those are really dangerous moments.
Right.
You're in a conversation with one person and someone says something that's a little bit racist, a little bit homophobic, a little bit sexist, and you say, oh, I'm not going to take this one on, right? Those small moments. Or you vote for one candidate or another, even though you know some of the things they say are not appropriate at best or downright bigoted at worst. You do it because they have other things that they stand for.
Right.
And you think, my husband and I joke, anyone can put up a Black Lives Matter sign, but there should be an asterisk next to it. Black Lives Matter, as long as it doesn't affect my white life, right?
Wow.
We know who the bad guys are, but most of us think of ourselves as the good guys.
Right.
But if you're a good guy, it means not only saying the right things or wearing the right t-shirts, it means actually getting into the fray and taking risks.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's something that you said earlier on the drive here, and it made me think about just in recent news, the Secretary of State of Georgia started receiving threats and things of that nature because there's a great debate, as we all know, dealing with the recount and things of that nature. And it's so interesting that he spoke against the violence and the threats because it happened to him, but yet Stacey Abrams, yet so many others who are out there at the grassroots level have been receiving threats, and yet they were silent, said nothing. But once it happens, once it happens to them, then all of a sudden we want to speak. And we're in a time now, Rabbi, where I believe that is no longer political. It's justice versus injustice, love versus hate, right versus wrong. And one has to make a decision which side of the line you're going to stand on. And you said something profound. Said, what type of legacy are you wanting to leave behind? Because you have to look beyond yourself and see the greater good, the greater cause. Yeah.
And you said, I'm sorry, you did, yes, and you said something so important, that this idea that one of the things we are asking, especially for white people in this pursuit of justice, is to actually put yourself in other people's shoes.
Absolutely.
And that's not easy, right? It is not easy to understand, right? It's not easy for me to understand what it's like to walk into a store and be tailed by someone and how that could make me furious, right? It is not easy for me to understand. But that doesn't mean that because it's hard to understand, we should not do the work at all.
Absolutely.
Right? We don't have the luxury of waiting till we have experienced something analogous
Absolutely.
to other people's pain.
Absolutely.
We just have to get right in there. And then the other thing, of course, that requires is believing other people's stories, right?
Right.
This idea that we don't believe other people's stories because,
Right.
I mean, like, do we think that police brutality started when videos recordings were invented? No, they've been happening for a very long time, and people have been saying things about them.
Right.
But of course, we didn't have the recording, so we didn't believe it.
Right. And it's so important, and this is the thing again that I so appreciate the relationship and this time that we share, because it gives opportunity and space and what we could consider sacred space to share our stories. And not only that, but to give opportunity for us to understand our plight and what we have discovered over the 5 or 6 years, at least, that I've been at Turner, is how our faith and the causes of social justice, how they intersect, and it's just really awesome.
We drove up to Philadelphia together, and there's a time in the car. We've been friends now for 5 or 6 years, right? It's a long time, as you just said. And there was a time in the car where each of us said to the other, I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm nervous to say it because I don't know if it's going to offend you or if it's the wrong thing. Right?
Absolutely.
That's after 5 years of friendship.
Absolutely.
This work is hard work, and you
Absolutely.
have to take risks, and you have to get in the mess, and you're going to screw up.
And ask those tough questions.
It's the only way we're going
That's
to
the
keep
only
on
way.
moving forward.
That's the
Because
only
otherwise,
way.
we're going to be stuck in our bones.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been great.
This is wonderful.
great.
Let's be honest, everyone. We know why you really come to the MLK Shabbat experience or to services at Turner on Sunday mornings, and it's to hear the choirs sing. So what a blessing it is that Jarrell Pridgeon, the Director of Music and Worship at Turner Memorial, and Robin Farber, who helps coordinate the Six and I Chorus, have figured out a way to get our two choirs to sing together this evening. I cannot wait to hear it myself. They always make my soul soar, and I'm sure tonight will be no different. Thank you so much to the members of the choirs who dedicated their time and their energy to making the prayers tonight come to life.
So, Rabbi,
Yes.
here we are.
Yeah, this is so beautiful.
Let me welcome you to Mother Bethel, African Methodist Episcopal Church. This is basically the site in where the African Methodist Episcopal Church was birthed. From its founding in 1816.
Wow.
It was founded by Bishop Richard Allen. At the time, had purchased his freedom from his slave master, and him, along with a few other parishioners, were at St. George's Methodist Church, which is right down the road. And during one worship service, they were kneeling for prayer. And it just so happened that particular Sunday that there was no more seating that was in the regular part of the sanctuary, because during that time there was reserved seating in the back of the church, the gallery, for the black parishioners. And so during a moment of prayer, when there was no more room, the white parishioners came and pulled them up off their knees while they were in the midst of prayer.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, they walked out of St. George, never to return, and they landed here, which was originally a blacksmith shop. And so I just think that it was important for us to drop by during our journey here to Philadelphia, so that I can share with you this particular story of the founding of the African Methodist Episcopal Church that was birthed out of a social justice movement that took place there at St. George's. And so it's really
beautiful.
It's really surreal. And the fact that how oftentimes our faith and our reality often intersect, and I believe that it is our faith that should inform our reality. And when we talk about salvation, when we talk about faith, you have to speak about justice. You have to speak about the ills that exist in society, because our faith is not isolated to, in our case, just Sunday morning worship, but it's everyday life. And I tell my members oftentimes at Turner, I said, it's not enough for me to preach you happy, if you will, on Sunday, and you catch hell Monday through Saturday, because you don't have health care, you don't have a living wage. And so the work that we're involved in, the work that we do, really reaches beyond just a Sunday or a Sabbath. It goes into the everyday aspects of persons' lives. And so, welcome, and that's really pretty much the story.
Okay, I want to talk about this what faith and reality intersecting looks like to you. So what you're saying is that we live our lives every single day, and in the ways that we live our lives day to day, 7 days a week, as you were saying, we have to bring our faith or our lack of it. Is it like that our faith is something that has to walk with us every day, and it can't be something that we only experience when good things are happening, or is it comes with us always?
I think it is important for it to be with you always, your belief, because from that is where you gain your morals, where you gain your perspective on how you treat each other, how you treat yourself. I think it's important for it to, like as you said, to literally to be with us and to walk with us and to inform our existence and our interactions each and every day.
All right, so that leads me to ask you a question, which makes me feel a little bit nervous asking you. But
sure.
That's how we roll.
That's right. We can do that.
So, Judaism is a tradition that's thousands of years old, and there are a lot of Jewish teachings or ways Jewish teachings have been understood that have done a lot of harm to people over the millennia, right? Teachings about queer people or about women. And one of the things I struggle with as a rabbi is how can I represent a tradition that has so much, within Judaism, there are some teachings that are pretty terrible. I don't know how to say it, right? They're xenophobic, and they're just like harmful to human beings. And I think about what it must be like. My question is, like, Christianity has also been used in terrible ways, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking right now of the way that it was used to sort of continue the enslavement of human beings, specifically Black people.
Right.
And so I guess I want to ask you about faith, and I want to ask you about like how you can sort of stay loyal to, inspired by a tradition that has been used so often to harm, to hurt, to murder,
Yes.
and to destroy. Help me, Pastor. Give me advice.
Sir, that's a real question, and I think that the struggle that exists between faith and reality must exist. I think it was Frederick Douglass who said, "If there's no struggle, there's no progress." I wish I had a magic formula and things of that nature, but you are so correct, is that when we look at history and the use of scripture, the use of Christianity, the use of things done in the name of Jesus to justify the evils, was all based upon a warped and ignorant perspective, misinterpreting scripture. There is in the New Testament a passage of scripture where Paul was talking with Pastor Timothy, and in his letter he says to Timothy, "Study to show thyself approved, a work person that rightly divides the word of truth." When I look at that particular passage of scripture, not only was Paul admonishing Timothy to study the word, but study life, study people. Be aware of your surroundings, because oftentimes God does work through history. God works through events. And when he shared with Timothy to study so that you can rightly divide, that leads to that leads to the possibility of persons wrongly dividing. Sort of what we are seeing in 2020 with the white evangelicals, and how they are using their pulpit and Christianity to promote racism and oppression and division. That's not the same God that we interpret. That's not the same God that we understand. That's not the same Christianity that we adopt and we receive.
Okay, so, all right, here's what I'm hearing you saying, which actually, so the first thing is that there is a way of understanding, like when there are ways that sort of religion is bastardized, right? It is used to harm,
Absolutely.
to kill, as it has been over the millennia. Right? That is not true religion. Like the true religion
Absolutely.
comes when people learn and continue learning, right? Which is a deep value in Judaism. And when people are continually open to learning as opposed to closed-mindedness.
Right. I'm glad that you're here, and we should take a trip down to
It's
the
time.
museum.
This is Sarah Allen, who is, of course, the wife of our founder, Bishop Richard Allen. She was very instrumental in aiding the persons here in Philadelphia when the yellow fever broke out. During that another pandemic, absolutely, during another pandemic. And so she really aided, and as a matter of fact, I think there are some history books that record Independence Hall was used as a trauma type of unit for persons who were affected by the yellow fever. But that's his wife there, and it's just an art rendition of the 4 churches that were built. The first one, of course, being the blacksmith shop, and then they did the brick, and now the current one here. And so basically, this is it, and the crypt where our founder last remains are. along with his wife. And so this particular museum is privately funded.
Wow.
Here, and we're just grateful for the Reverend Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler for opening up the building for us to come in to do this and for me to share with you.
Are there many churches where the pastors are entombed in the?
No.
This is it.
This is it. Yeah. This is it. The founder, and it was because it was on this particular location in where as the blacksmith shop was located,
Right.
and the following sequences of buildings, and so we thought it would be best to make sure that he's left here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's really meaningful.
Yeah. All right, after you. Let's go. It's interesting. I wanted to share with you. In this site, this is actually the pulpit and the pews from the first church that Bishop Richard Allen and them started here. And you notice right there above the pulpit was the old traditional motto of the AME Church. And I stress the old traditional one. Because as you can see, the language, the language is old. God our Father, Christ our Redeemer, man our brother. And so now we have changed that to be God our Creator, Christ our Redeemer, and humankind, our brother and sister, to be more inclusive of everyone, because we know God is God over everyone. Everyone is,
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
Right. So it's the evolution of religion.
Absolutely.
Some things stay the same,
Right.
but some things need to change
Absolutely.
to be more inclusive.
Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Enter his courts with praise. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Enter his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him. Thankful unto him. Be thankful unto him. Thankful unto him. And bless his We've come to praise his name. 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 And bless his We've come to praise his name. 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 Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
I need to tell you a secret.
Okay.
When we thought of this idea of coming to Philadelphia and coming to the National Museum of American Jewish History, I was so excited to show you a piece of American Jewish history come alive, and for us to be on Independence Mall, and for us to be sitting in front of Independence Hall, which, you know, to me represented sort of freedom and America, and sort of all of the possibilities for that Jews, white Jews, have been able to experience in America. And you hear at the end, I said Jews, white Jews, because I started to realize, I don't know what Independence Hall means to you.
Wow, yeah.
Black Americans have a very different experience of this building. I see it as a sacred place where so many of our I saw it. I was raised with it as a sacred place where so many of our founding documents were signed. And so I just want to begin by asking you, like, sitting in front of this building, what are your responses? What does it feel like as a black man, as a black American, to be sitting on Independence Mall?
I have a lot of mixed feelings, a lot of mixed thoughts, because, of course, I've known nothing else but America. But yet, when we look at it from a historical perspective, the men who gathered there in Independence Hall to declare their independence and to formulate this country, the reality is they were slave owners.
Yeah.
And the fact that many people have migrated to America because the land of the free and opportunities and things of that nature, and ultimately, yeah, they do exist, but they came on their own free will, where my ancestors didn't.
Yeah.
We were literally forced to come, and the realization is that the wealth of this country, in many instances, were built on the backs of slaves on plantations, working the fields and being stripped of their identity, being stripped away from families, and here we are again experiencing the 21st century of that, when our Latinx brothers and sisters, at the border, being separated from families and things of that nature. So it's almost like, okay, yeah, you all got your independence, but that independence was for who? Because it definitely wasn't for my ancestors.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there are like 7 things you said that I want to respond to. One of which is you're talking about sort of that so much of America, including our own White House, was built using the labor of enslaved people.
Absolutely.
And even to this day, so much of American wealth has been generated on the backs of people, most of them, thank God, not literally enslaved people, meaning people working for free, but still people working in terrible working conditions, people being underpaid and treated in all sorts of unfair ways, and with the wealth gap only growing larger and larger and larger. So as much as we'd like to say that things are getting better in America, and of course in some ways there are, we still have to stay very much aware.
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing, I was looking at this pandemic.
Yeah.
And I remember during the first stages of quarantine, they identified essential persons.
Yep.
They are your grocery store clerks.
Yep.
They are your people who work in the gas stations, your truck drivers.
Right.
And it's so funny that the essential persons are the very people who can't earn a living wage.
That's right, without getting up and going out to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the very thing that's holding this country together.
That's right.
Are the ones who are getting paid less.
That's right. That's right.
You see what I'm saying? And so it's capitalism at its finest. I mean, and it's I went ahead and said it is.
Right. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and It's capitalism. I mean, I think about one of the things you said in the car earlier today was you were talking about Dr. King
Yes.
as someone who sort of railed against, I don't want to take your word, but sort of railed against the excesses of capitalism. And how in his day, actually, he was not beloved the way he is today.
Right.
He was not sanitized the way he is today.
Right.
And could you talk about that a little bit more?
And what we were sharing is that when you really look at the time leading up to his assassination,
Yep.
Was a moment in which, in one of the interviews where he reflected on the dream that he had for America, and he said that it has become a nightmare.
Yeah.
And the fact that leading up to his assassination, he began looking at capitalism.
Yeah.
He began looking at the history of America giving money and land to other cultures of people because of things that were caused by their hands, but yet still blacks in America have received nothing. And he said that the next march to Washington was to go there to get a check.
That's right.
So that because we also aided in the building of this country, and this country needs to recognize it. And I believe that that's really what led up to his assassination, because he was getting ready to tackle the capitalism that exists, in this country, and it's pretty sad that the wealth that this country has, but yet it is not shared and distributed. It's not shared or distributed equally.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice if it was more equally, but I'll take a little bit more. It's like
Right.
Everyone doesn't need to have exactly the same, God forbid.
Right.
But just a little bit more. So okay, so then here's the question: do you believe in America's promise? Because I will answer. I'll answer for myself first. Give you time to think. I still believe in America's promise. I don't necessarily believe that this is what our founding fathers, and they are fathers. They were all. I don't believe this is maybe what they were necessarily intending. Women couldn't vote. Enslaved peoples were not even treated like human beings.
Sure.
But I still believe that one day we can figure it out. Now, it might be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as we've experienced. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think, and I'm trying to reflect. I don't know if it was you who said this. Is that true justice is rooted in love. And again, do I believe? I believe it's possible.
Yeah.
But at what cost? How many more lives must be sacrificed? At what point? When? Because this has been a cry. If we just go back to it's been a cry since the 50s, the 60s, and here we are in 2020, and it's still it's still the same cry. So when will the promise become a reality? And so I struggle with that question, because I really don't know, Rabbi. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that is not to say, now let me say this, that's not to say that we have not, we have benefited from the sacrifices of our ancestors and our, persons who marched, and persons who were, we have benefited from that, because we have come a long way, but yet the suppression and the oppression is more covert, and it's more
That's right.
It's more subtle. Actually, it's not. It's no longer subtle because
Yeah.
But I don't want anyone to feel as if we have not benefited. But it is a thing of where it's still real and prevalent. I mean, that's really the bottom line. It's still real and prevalent, and we still have to give voice to it in order to make a difference.
Yeah. Look, maybe that is one of the silver linings of the last few years is that a lot of ideas got airtime that
Sure.
have been kept under wraps in America, even as people have experienced them personally.
Right.
And so maybe the job of the next 4 years, 8 years, 20 years, 200 years is to recognize that these forces of hate exist,
Absolutely.
that we can't pretend they don't, and
Absolutely.
that our job is to continue to work, to fight, to grow, to battle. And I don't mean that in terms of physical violence. I mean that in terms of rhetorical words and legislation and whatever other things that we can do to really continue to believe that the change is not something that, happened with emancipation in 1864.
Right.
Or, with, the Voting Rights Act in it's happening. The change still needs to happen.
Still
and
needs to
continue to
happen.
happen.
Absolutely. Because if we remain silent, and I remember I shared this in a message that I did at one Shabbat, and when I brought forth the responsibilities of the prophet,
Yeah.
and really was trying to declare that everyone in the house had a prophetic calling to raise their voices like a ram's horn.
That's right.
And cry aloud. All of us have a mandate to be prophets that speak against the deep-rooted ills that exist, that we see, that we come across. All of us.
Yeah.
And we have to do it in order to make a difference.
Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much for being on this journey with us this evening, whether you're watching it Friday evening or over the course of the weekend or at any point in the future. But really, thank you not just for watching this video with us. Thank you for being with Sixth and I and with Turner Memorial and with all of us who are pledged and redoubling our pledge to fight for justice, not just in the voting booth and not just when we go out and protest and not just in the church or the synagogue, but also everywhere we go, with every word we say and every breath we take and every dollar that we spend. If you are watching this before Sunday morning of Martin Luther King weekend, please join me and Pastor Kearney and Turner Memorial Church for their Sunday morning service. It is 10 a.m. on their Facebook page. I look forward to metaphorically seeing you there. Take care, everyone. Thanks again.
Oh,